Here's a staggering fact. Global sanctions cost the world economy hundreds of billions each year, impacting everything from oil prices to job markets in ways you might not expect. But do these costly tools achieve the political changes they aim for? Welcome back to Global Narrative. Today we're diving into a controversial tool in international relations: sanctions. For centuries, nations have used sanctions to apply economic pressure, aiming to curb nuclear ambitions, punish human rights violations, or protect allies. Sanctions are like economic pressure points, meant to hurt enough to force change. But what happens when these measures don't work as planned or even backfire? We'll explore the role of sanctions in today's world, how effective they really are, and what it costs nations and people worldwide.
We will later today present a package of massive and targeted sanctions to European leaders for their approval. We are coordinated closely with our partners and allies, the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada and Norway, but also, for example, Japan and Australia. This package will include financial sanctions that harshly limit Russia's access to the capital markets. These sanctions will have a heavy impact. Russia's economy has already faced intensive pressure in the recent weeks, and these pressures will now accumulate. These sanctions will suppress Russia's economic growth, increase the borrowing costs, raise inflation, intensify capital outflow, and gradually erode its industrial basis.
When imposing sanctions, nations often have clear goals. They want to create economic pressure that will lead to political change. But as straightforward as that sounds, the reality is far more complex. Firstly, sanctions don't operate in a vacuum. They come with the risk of economic blowback, where the sanctions end up affecting not only the targeted nation, but also the economies of those imposing them. For instance, when Europe sanctioned Russian energy imports to protest its actions in Ukraine, the cost didn't just hit Russia. European countries themselves faced record-high energy prices, which led to increased costs for everyday goods, impacted businesses, and contributed to inflation. The backlash was so strong that some European industries had to scale back operations or find costly alternatives. This kind of blowback can cause hesitation among countries, especially when they're economically connected to the nation being sanctioned. Another problem is enforcement. Sanctions often create a lucrative black market economy. Countries under heavy sanctions may seek out alternative, often illicit, methods to keep their economies going. In fact, sanctions can lead to the rise of new alliances among sanctioned nations and their supporters. These alliances can shift global trade patterns, giving rise to a kind of sanctions economy where certain countries specialize in evading or bypassing restrictions. As we'll see, this complexity often leads to unintended consequences and sometimes strengthens the very regimes that sanctions aim to weaken.
We are enforcing the most significant package of economic sanctions in history, and it's causing significant damage to Russia's economy. It has caused Russian economy to, frankly, crater. The Russian ruble is now down to 50%, by 50% since Putin announced his war. 1 ruble is now worth less than 1 American penny. 1 ruble is less than 1 American penny. And we're preventing Russia's central bank from propping up the ruble and to keep its value up. They're not going to be able to do that now. We cut Russia's largest banks from the international financial system, and it has crippled their ability to do business with the rest of the world. In addition, we're choking off Russia's access to technology like semiconductors that are and sap its economic strength and weaken its military for years to come. Major companies are pulling out of Russia entirely without even being asked, not by us. Over the weekend, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, they all suspended their services in Russia, all of them, joining a growing list of American and global companies from Ford to Nike to Apple. They've suspended their operations in Russia. The U.S. Stock Exchange has halted trading of many Russian securities. And the private sector is united against Russia's vicious war of choice. The U.S. Department of Justice has assembled a dedicated task force to go after the crimes of Russian oligarchs. And we're joining with our European allies to find and seize their yachts, their luxury apartments, their private jets, and all their ill-begotten gains to make sure that they share in the pain of Putin's war. These, by the way, are giant yachts. You've put some of them in your press. I mean, some of them are, I think I've read one was over 400 feet long. I mean, this is worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Real-world cases of sanctions reveal just how complex and unpredictable these measures can be. Take Iran, for example. In an effort to halt Iran's nuclear program, Western nations imposed strict sanctions that cut Iran off from the global banking system and limited its access to many goods. The result? Severe economic hardship, rising prices, and scarcity of certain goods for Iranian citizens. But here's the twist. Instead of collapsing, Iran adapted, developing its own domestic industries to fill in the gaps left by sanctioned goods. Over time, this led to a degree of self-reliance that few anticipated. Then there's the case of Russia. Facing waves of sanctions from the US, Europe, and others, Russia's economy has been hit hard. But rather than causing a collapse, these sanctions prompted Russia to focus on its own industries and find new trade partners in countries like China and India. These new relationships allowed Russia to redirect its exports and continue its economy in different ways. For example, the restrictions on tech imports motivated Russia to accelerate its tech industries, sparking a surprising resilience. While these adaptations come at a cost, they demonstrate that sanctioned nations often find ways to lessen the impact and even capitalize on new opportunities. In each case, we see a pattern. While sanctions do create hardship, they also drive resilience and adaptation, often in ways that empower local industries and shift global alliances. These adaptations reveal that sanctions may have limitations in their effectiveness, especially when nations are prepared to withstand long-term challenges. One of the most significant cases where sanctions changed global power dynamics was during apartheid in South Africa. For years, many nations around the world imposed sanctions to protest the racial segregation and human rights abuses of apartheid. These sanctions restricted South Africa's economy by cutting off trade, isolating it from the global community, and creating economic hardship. Over time, this economic pressure fueled public discontent and contributed to internal dissent against apartheid policies. This case is often cited as a success story, a moment where sanctions achieved a significant social and political transformation. But it's also a reminder of how much time and commitment it takes for sanctions to have a profound effect. The apartheid sanctions didn't bring immediate change. They took years to finally create the necessary political shift. And they didn't come without sacrifice. The South African economy and many citizens suffered during that period. This success, however, showed that under the right conditions, sanctions can contribute to historical change. But it's rarely a quick or easy fix. The South Africa case reminds us that while sanctions can influence policy, they require patience, and there's no guarantee they'll produce the desired outcomes. In summary, sanctions are complex and often double-edged. They aim to pressurize nations into political change, but they also bring unintended effects, from causing economic blowback on the countries enforcing them to strengthening internal resilience in the targeted nations. Sanctions create both visible and hidden impacts. They're powerful tools, but their effectiveness and consequences can vary greatly, depending on the political landscape and the resilience of the targeted country. In some cases, they may push nations towards self-sufficiency, even independence in key industries. In others, they can contribute to significant political change, but only with sustained effort and global support. So, what's your take on sanctions? Do you think they're worth the risks and costs, or do they sometimes create more harm than good? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're interested in diving deeper into global power dynamics, check out our next video on how economic alliances shape international politics. Make sure to subscribe to Global Narrative for more insights into the stories that shape our world. Thanks for watching. So, what's your take on sanctions? Do you think they're worth the risks and costs, or do they sometimes create more harm than good? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're interested in diving deeper into global power dynamics, check out our next video on how economic alliances shape international politics. Make sure to subscribe to Global Narrative for more insights into the stories that shape our world. Thanks for watching.